Hey everyone, it's Short Fiction Friday. This will probably be a short episode this week because these are the final three short stories that I have to cover for this season, so I don't have to select any more at the end of the episode. This week I read three short stories, well, really two short stories and one short script. I read The Psycho by Michael O'Donoghue, Bright Blades Gleaming by Basil and Survivor Type by Stephen King. Let's start with The Psycho by Michael O'Donoghue. This is the one that's a script. It's a very short script, as if it was written for like a sketch comedy show. And Michael O'Donoghue, I think, was a Saturday Night Live writer. In this script, we follow what appears to be a spree killer. We get little scenes of his spree as he goes from person to person. And then at the end, there's a humorous twist which recontextualizes everything that we just saw. This would be perfectly okay as a little 2-minute comedy sketch. And it was a breeze to read, of course, because it's so short and there's so much white space. But you do kind of get the question, why was this put into the anthology? It seems quite out of place. Maybe some readers would find it a refreshing change of pace, I guess. And it definitely fit the theme. This was okay. It was fine. Now, there was a little note at the end that said it was going to be filmed with, I think, Penn and Teller as like a short movie, or I guess a short sketch. I couldn't find any evidence of the completed sketch online, so it might never have been filmed. I'm not too sure. That's just from some very rudimentary searching around. I wasn't going to do a deep dive into Penn and Teller shows or anything looking for this. The next thing I read was Bright Blades Gleaming by Basil Copper. This was 30 pages long and simply didn't need to be. It's a series of diary entries, or it's kind of framed as diary entries. So you get the first person perspective as this guy's writing about his day or days. And it's set in the late 1800s in Europe. I think in Germany. One of the main characters has the title Frau, so I assumed Germany, but I can't really remember, to be honest. Through the diary, you get a increasing sense that there's something off about this guy, that he's a psychopath. He's obsessed with knives. He doesn't seem to have much respect for human life. He's always comparing people to insects, or even preferring insects to people. And a couple of times he offhandedly implies that he's killed a person before. A lot of the contents of the diary are just sitting in restaurants, sitting in cafes, eating food and kind of people watching, and it's really quite dull. In principle, I don't have any problem with this. You know, if the writer had interesting observations, if he had interesting descriptions of food, it would have been fine. But there really wasn't, and nothing much happens for like 30 pages before it finally limps to what was a pretty obvious reveal at the end. Now, additionally, and this is probably just a small personal thing, the writing of diaries and the presentation of diaries, it always just doesn't quite seem believable to me. Because my thought process is always, you're writing all these details down in a diary you don't want anyone to find. You remembered all the conversations you had throughout the day. It's funny because I can believe almost anything, you know, all sorts of fantastical or science fiction strangeness. But once you frame it as a diary, I'm like, nobody would write that much in their diary. Anyway, whatever, that's just a pet peeve. I didn't think this was a good short story, which is a shame because I've read Basil Copper before. I think it was a werewolf story called Cry Wolf, and I thought that was good. It was fine. This one, Bright Blades Gleaming, it was pretty boring, unfortunately. All right, and the last thing I read this week was Survivor Type by Stephen King. This short story was first published in Terrors in 1982, and that anthology was edited by Charles L. Grant. In this short story, we have a drug-dealing surgeon named Richard, and he's been marooned on an island. Once again, it's kind of framed as a diary. It's his diary. It's his log of trying to survive. And he sort of gives some of his backstory and how he got into this situation and why he's so determined to survive. Now, because he was a drug dealer, he happened to have a lot of heroin with him. He was transporting it. And while he's marooned on this island, his ankle becomes really badly damaged, and he decides to start self-medicating with the heroin. I won't spoil what happens next, but it's quite gnarly. It's quite gross. But yeah, I thought it was good. Now, once again, we get into the believability of diary writing. Is this guy really going to talk about his ankle snapping? Is he really going to write things down while he's high on heroin? And I think I made this criticism of the previous Stephen King story I read as well. As the character becomes more crazed, you start getting into like spelling errors and he's writing down nonsense and that kind of thing. That never really appeals to me. But these are just small little criticisms. Overall, this was a very good story. It's a Stephen King short story from the 1980s. I mean, I'm sure almost all of them are good. All right, and ranking these short stories, potentially putting them onto my top 20. So I'll put my top 20 list up on the screen here. This week, none of the short stories will make the list, so it stays as it is. This is the final top 20, so that's the list. The Stephen King short story was quite good. That's the one I enjoyed the most this week. The other two, so Basil Copper and Michael O'Donoghue, not so much. So yeah, that's it for the short stories for a couple of weeks. I've really enjoyed covering the short stories for the last 30 plus weeks. I'm surprised I was able to keep a consistent schedule. Next week, I'm going to do a season wrap-up, so I'll talk about the anthologies overall and what I thought about them. I'll talk about some highlights, and I'll also probably pick out maybe 10 or so novels that I want to read based on the authors that I enjoyed the most. Then the week after that, I'll be picking all new anthologies. All right, thanks for watching. See you all next week for the season wrap-up. Okay, bye.